Welcome to the Haunted Brew. Grab your favorite blend of coffee or tea and pull up a comfy chair for some unexplainable and unsettling stories. Ones that may leave you intrigued or sleeping with the light on tonight. At nearly 6,000 feet in elevation and a population of less than 40, Spencer, Idaho would go unnoticed if not for its opal mine. The opals in Spencer are some of the finest, earning the town its nickname, Opal Capital of America. I spent a day out there, mining for opals in a fenced yard of white rock tailings trucked in from the Constellation mine. For a small fee, one can carry a bucket, hammer, and spray bottle onto the property and search for opals of the harlequin and pinfire variety. Whatever you find, you keep. My sister Jan and my hiking companion Tess went with me one afternoon in late summer. It was beautiful that day, the sky feathered with high clouds and a fan of brilliant sunlight just above the ridge. It was hot, dusty work, but a soft, lofty breeze refreshed us enough to persist. Definitely a day for the memories, and as much as I hate to admit it, Chan was the only one who found an opal worthy of cutting and setting. Spencer is bordered by vast, empty desert to the south and remote forested mountains to the north. Snow-filled canyons and icy creeks can make mountain travel by foot difficult. Snowshoes are a must if one hopes to cover any respectable distance in the wilderness. This is where we cut our Christmas tree in early December, and we vowed to return when the snowpack was a little deeper. The day after Christmas was gray and bitterly cold. Snow fell steadily and the air outside seemed to crystallize as I exhaled my warm breath against it. I split an armful of kindling and brought it into the house for building a fire when we returned from snowshoeing. Our close friends, Lex and Kayla, who are also avid hikers, would be joining us, so Tess and I packed extra chocolate, nuts, and coffee. Lex provided a thermos of hot apple cider with a splash of Fireball whiskey. Okay, before any eye-rolling and suggestions that what we experienced might be attributed to the cider, the amount of whiskey was just enough to ward off the cold as we hiked. You could refer to it as just wetting the bottom of the glass. The highway exit for our forest road was a solid sheet of ice. Kayla slowed her truck to a cautious crawl and tapped the brakes lightly as she approached the stop sign. She signaled left and drove to the end of the road. A snow field lay before us, and the gauzy light of the sun struggled through an overcast sky. Kayla shut the engine off, and I stepped from the truck to pull my pack from the bed. Snow squeaked beneath my boots, and I coughed for my first breath of icy air. I was ready for that apple cider before I had even strapped down my snowshoes. We all remarked about the shock of cold mountain air, but it was never a question whether we would proceed with our hike. We marched single file through the snow, stepping off the main trail and onto the lower canyon loop as dark clouds gathered before us. Tess and I took turns breaking trail. The lead hiker establishes a path. Second hiker tamps down the snow. This creates an easier, more defined trail for the snowshoers bringing up the rear. With Lex's injured hip and Kayla having knee pain, Tess and I switched with each other in the first two positions, punching our way through the calf-deep snow. We were 20 minutes into our hike when Lex mentioned the trees. Unnatural bends and sweeps with a full-grown tree growing up out of the trunk of another. What made the scene even stranger was that these trees were lodgepole pine and Douglas fir, yet twisted in every direction like an aged oak. It isn't that we thought of this as something paranormal, but it certainly set the mood as we continued further into the forest. After an hour of trudging through pristine snowpack, we decided to break beneath a large pine to share chocolate, dried mango, and Fireball cider. Tess, Lex, and Kayla made themselves comfortable, but I remained standing. I had an eerie feeling that kept me on my feet. Overhead, I heard a crow caw, then another, and Kayla asked if I had been talking to them. Another call, then the pair flew off overhead with a strong flutter of their sleek black wings. I watched them through the pines until they disappeared from sight. I took another sip of cider, then paused. Tess and Lex were talking, but the background silence became very obvious to me. The air seemed thick. Did it just get really quiet? I asked Kayla. She listened and then replied, "There's some sound that stopped. Was there a plane or something?" I began feeling uneasy at this point. Not a single sound apart from our conversation traveled through the surrounding forest. It's difficult to put into words, but it was as if we suddenly found ourselves inside a vacuum. Perhaps this is what drove the crows away. We listened a moment longer as we sipped the last of our cider. A small plane hummed in the distance, breaking any residual spell we were under. We smiled and nodded at each other, as though the approaching plane could somehow explain the previous silence. I threw a handful of snow inside my cup and washed it as best as one could in the backcountry. Kayla emptied the last of her drink and tapped her cup 3 times against a rock. "Great, that's how you summon a Sasquatch, you know. It's like wood knocks," I said to her. To be obnoxious, Kayla tapped her cup again, only more forcefully this time. "Keep it up. It's how people go missing in the woods," I replied. Kayla laughed and tucked her cup inside her backpack. Suddenly, we heard a noise. It was loud, just inside the trees further up the canyon. A sharp whooping sound. We all listened intently, and a few seconds later the whooping happened again. "What is that?" I asked. "I have never heard anything like that before," Lex replied. It should be noted that Lex and Kayla were raised in Montana and Idaho respectively, and come from a hunting background. To make Lex's response even more compelling is that she's actually an eye roller when it comes to Sasquatch. And the questions continued, only our voices were quieter now. Then the whooping call sounded for a 3rd time, and it was closer. Our packs were shouldered and we were on our feet, everyone thankful that no one had removed their snowshoes during the break. Questions arose about this creature's proximity, whether it might be a turkey or if anyone heard it as we were hiking on the way in. There were no definitive answers, but we all felt it was best to make our way back to the truck as quickly as possible. We heard the call one last time, closer, louder. And it was during this final call that we realized what made it seem so sinister. It was as though someone, or something, was trying to imitate an animal. We didn't panic, but there was certainly a sense of urgency. Once we stumbled out onto the forest road, Kayla started her truck with her remote key, a Christmas gift for which we were all grateful for. The headlights of her vehicle popped on, and we heard the engine hum from nearly a quarter of a mile away. Back at the truck, we tossed our packs and poles in the bed and knocked the snow off our boots. The cab was warm and felt secure. Kayla did a 6-point turn to angle her truck toward the highway, and I silently cursed her for not parking her truck facing out in the first place. With a slight fishtail on the icy on-ramp, we merged onto the highway and headed south at as fast a speed as safely possible. We cracked open another thermos and poured non-alcoholic coffee into a couple of cups. With the drone of wheels rolling across the empty road, and staring tiredly at the steam lazily rising from Tessa's coffee, I was fast asleep before we even rolled past the opal capital of America.